The revolving door. One of the most brutal deaths in Final Destination Bloodlines never actually made it to theaters. The deleted scene appears right after the famous hospital scene. You remember it, right? Darlene leaves the building with Stefani and her youngest son, Charlie. Everything seems calm, but a malfunction in the MRI machine starts causing interference around them. As they walk through the revolving door, the horseshoe pendant on Darlene's bag gets caught on the inner railing. The structure locks up because of the interference, while the mechanism keeps forcing the movement. She gets pressed against the side. Stephanie tries to pull her free. At the last second, they manage to jam the door with a book. Darlene collapses to the floor, alive. The audience breathes a sigh of relief. But this franchise rarely offers second chances. Outside, the hospital sign begins vibrating from the same electrical issues. The letter L breaks loose and falls straight onto Darlene. Abrupt ending marked by irony. The sequence was removed after test screenings. Many people felt the death happened too early before the family bond had been fully developed. The directors chose to reshoot the death for the final act, aiming for a bigger emotional impact. And if you rewatch the trailer song, you can actually spot part of the scene there. The eye bite. From Beyond from 1986 follows a scientific experiment that allows people to see creatures from another dimension. Dr. Tillinghast starts out as a normal researcher, but after using the machine several times, he changes. He becomes unstable, obsessed, physically altered. The constant contact with that other reality begins distorting everything, including him. The deleted scene happens when he's already completely out of control. During a confrontation, Tillinghast attacks a doctor. He rips her eye out with a bite, and the sequence continues in a way that went beyond the limit even for the standards of the time. It's excessive, grotesque, and hard to watch. The MPAA didn't let it pass. The production was forced to edit the moment to reduce the impact and secure a theatrical rating. The version originally shown in theaters had cuts that significantly toned down the intensity of the attack. Years later, the uncut version was released, restoring everything exactly as it was filmed. The final smile. Paranormal Activity follows Katie and Micah, a couple who begin recording strange phenomena inside their home after she says she's felt a presence since childhood. The concept is simple: a fixed camera, long nights, and small events that slowly get worse and worse. In the cut that went to theaters, the ending is already heavy. After days of growing tension, Katie disappears from the house during the night. Micah tries to look for her. The camera keeps recording the empty bedroom. After a long, unsettling silence, something violently throws him straight into the camera. Moments later, Katie appears in the doorway. She's covered in blood. Slowly, she walks toward the camera. She's smiling as she approaches the lens, and the footage ends. But that wasn't the only ending. The production actually filmed a much darker alternate version. In it, Katie enters the bedroom alone, stares at the camera for a few seconds, and simply smiles. After that, she grabs a knife and cuts her own throat right in front of the camera. This ending completely changes the tone. Instead of leaving room for doubt or a continuation, it closes the story in a definitive way. The Dead Friends. The first It movie places the town of Derry under the shadow of Pennywise, the clown that feeds on children's fear. At the center of the story is the Losers Club, but there's another danger lurking besides the supernatural entity: Henry Bowers. He's not just the school bully, he's violent, unstable, and he already starts the movie with an aggression that goes far beyond childish teasing. Throughout the story, Pennywise manipulates that anger, pushing Henry even further into chaos. At one point, he murders his own father in a moment that marks the character's complete breaking point. But there was more. In a scene that was cut from the film, Henry is seen sitting inside a car. Next to him are his two friends, Belch and Victor. But something is wrong. They're not talking. They're dead.
When you say fellas? Yeah. Sure you would.
The scene lasts less than half a minute, but it answers a question that felt a little unresolved in the final cut. What happened to Victor and Belch during the climax? In the version shown in theaters, they simply disappear from the story after entering the sewers behind Henry. The cut removes that explicit confirmation of their deaths, leaving their fate more implied. The Nurse. When The Devil's Rejects hit theaters as a sequel to House of 1000 Corpses, it became clear that the tone had changed. The Firefly family was now on the run after the police raid. Even so, one specific scene pulled the story back toward the more exaggerated side of the franchise. In it, the police recover the weakened body of Dr. Satan, the insane surgeon from the first movie. He appears in a hospital, hooked up to machines, apparently in a coma. That's when Rosario Dawson's character appears, playing Nurse Marcia in a brief cameo. She stands beside the bed to examine the patient. The environment is quiet and suggests only a subtle tension. Suddenly, Dr. Satan wakes up and attacks. The death happens almost at the exact moment the character is introduced. In an extremely graphic sequence with practical effects, the scene was fully filmed, but it ended up being removed. The director later explained that he realized Dr. Satan's presence clashed with the more grounded realism he wanted for the sequel. In the final cut, the character was removed from the main narrative. The appearance was limited to extra material, and since then, he has not officially returned to the franchise. The rat scene. Barbarian starts as a simple suspense story. Tess rents a house and discovers there's already a stranger staying there. But the movie becomes something else entirely when the basement reveals an absurd secret. Down there lives a creature known as the Mother. And that's when the story completely spirals out of control. Among the deleted scenes, there's one that became infamous behind the scenes as the rat scene. In the movie, AJ, Justin Long's character, ends up trapped underground with the creature. She tries to force him to accept her maternal affection, even offering milk as if he were a baby. In the final cut, it's already uncomfortable, but originally it was worse. In the removed version, AJ refuses to be breastfed, so the mother changes tactics. She captures a live rat that runs through the area, then she bites the animal's head off and begins chewing it. After that, she forces AJ's mouth open and spits what she chewed directly into him, mimicking the behavior of a bird feeding its chick. And yes, this was filmed. According to Kreger and editor Joe Murphy, the decision to cut it came for a few reasons. One of them being that the scene showed the creature acting so animalistic that it could remove the twisted maternal trait the director wanted to preserve. And let's be honest, Barbarian is already uncomfortable the way it is. With that scene, it might have crossed a line not everyone would be willing to follow. Hell's Pleasure. Released in 1997, Event Horizon was supposed to be much heavier than what we actually saw in the movie. In the film, a spaceship disappears for years and suddenly reappears near Neptune, leading a rescue team to investigate the mystery. Inside, they discover that an experimental engine opened a portal to another dimension. The problem is that this place seems to have influenced the crew in a devastating way. Director Paul W.S. Anderson originally delivered a cut that ran around 130 minutes. The studio thought it was way too intense. Test screenings recorded extreme reactions, with people walking out of the theater. The decision was clear: reduce the runtime and the violence. The most famous case involves the recording of the ship's original crew. In theaters, we only see quick flashes that are almost subliminal. In the original version, the sequence was long and detailed, showing the crew completely losing their sanity after the dimensional trip. Practical effects and prosthetics made everything graphic. The so-called blood orgy ended up being reduced to just a few seconds. The hallucinations were also shortened. Dr. Weir's visions of his dead wife were longer and more disturbing. The final confrontation between Miller and Weir originally had more grotesque imagery, later simplified to keep the pacing. Even the discovery of DJ's body lost visual details, focusing more on the character's reactions. A large portion of the removed material was lost. Film reels stored in Transylvania were too deteriorated to restore. The full version will probably never see the light of day. Ironically, the director himself admitted that suggesting more than showing actually made the horror even more unsettling. A game with censorship. In Scream from 1996, we meet Casey Becker. She's home alone when she answers a phone call that turns into pure terror. On the other end of the line is Ghostface, and outside in the backyard, tied up, is her boyfriend Steve Orth. In the original version sent for rating approval, Steve's death was heavier. After he was attacked, there was an explicit moment showing his organs falling from his lap to the ground. The association responsible for movie ratings in the United States, the Motion Picture Association of America, considered that way too excessive. The result? The scene had to be changed. In the uncut version, the camera holds a little longer. You can better notice the character's condition and the impact on his face. In the version that reached theaters, everything happens faster. Less time for the audience to process it, but it still works. And that wasn't the only moment. The death of Kenny, the cameraman, also lost a few seconds because his expression of pain was considered too disturbing. Tatum's scene in the garage door had a few frames reduced, and in the final confrontation, when Billy and Stu injure themselves to pretend they're victims, the blood couldn't be shown dripping onto the floor. What's most curious is that even with the cuts, the opening scene remains one of the most impactful in horror. The Final Ball. In The Shining from 1980, a writer accepts a job taking care of an isolated hotel during the winter and brings his family along, but the place starts affecting his mind, and everything spirals out of control. The official ending is direct and disturbing. Jack freezes to death in the maze. Then the camera reveals that old photograph in the hallway of the Overlook. Jack appears in it decades before he was born. It's the kind of ending that still creates theories to this day. But there was a different epilogue. After escaping the hotel, the story would move to a hospital. Wendy and Danny would be alive, recovering. The audience would get clear confirmation that both of them survived. No ambiguity about their immediate fate. The hotel manager Ullman would appear to visit them. It would be a calm conversation, almost comforting in tone. Very different from Stanley Kubrick's usual cold style. But before leaving, Ullman would toss Danny a tennis ball. The same ball connected to one of the strangest moments inside the hotel. A simple gesture suggesting that the Overlook was still connected to them. The scene was actually shown in the first screenings. A few days later, Kubrick ordered everything removed. The copies were collected, and the hospital ending practically vanished. Interestingly, while critics later treated the film as a masterpiece, Stephen King, who wrote the original book, always criticized this version. For him, it lacked emotion. Maybe that epilogue would have made things clearer, but Kubrick preferred the permanent sense of unease, and that's exactly what keeps the movie alive to this day. Hand on the wall. In A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Freddy Krueger continues attacking teenagers through their dreams. Here we follow Kristen, one of the survivors from the previous film, who still carries the trauma of facing the killer from people's nightmares. This fourth movie already starts shifting the tone of the franchise. Many people consider it the point where the series begins losing the raw horror of the first films. There's a deleted scene that shows Freddy wearing sunglasses and imitating the style of the protagonist from Miami Vice while chasing Kristen in a dream. Here we see a much cooler version of him, totally outside the usual standards of a horror villain. The reason it was cut was music rights, and honestly, that might have been a blessing. That joke would have made the comedic direction of the franchise even clearer, something that disappointed many fans who felt the series was losing its original style. The Double Monster. In The Fly, we meet Seth Brundle, a brilliant scientist who creates telepods capable of transporting matter. The experiment goes wrong when a fly enters the pod with him. The genetic fusion begins, and the transformation is slow, disgusting, and inevitable. In the middle of that physical and mental deterioration, there was a sequence that never made it into the final version, the famous monkey-cat scene. Already very unstable, Seth decides to test a possible solution for his condition. He uses the telepods to fuse a baboon with a cat. The idea was to study the genetic exchange before attempting something more radical, but the result brings no scientific answers. What appears is a deformed creature with two heads, clearly suffering. The situation gets out of control and has to be ended violently. During this sequence, Seth's own transformation also advances. A strange appendage appears on his body, and he deals with it in a desperate way. It's uncomfortable even by the movie's standards, but in test screenings, the audience completely lost sympathy for Seth when they saw him mistreating animals. Director David Cronenberg realized the problem and cut everything, and it was a strategic choice, because The Fly works precisely when we can still feel sorry for the man behind the monster, the rubber dummy. In Cannibal Holocaust, the movie follows a team of documentary filmmakers who disappear in the Amazon while recording what was supposed to be a report about local tribes. Months later, another group finds the tapes they left behind. The film became famous for its extreme violence and for its found footage style, long before that format became a trend. It was so convincing that director Ruggero Deodato was actually accused of murder and had to prove in court that the actors were still alive. But there's a deleted scene that almost completely broke the dark tone of the movie. The idea was to show a piranha attack. To create the effect, the production placed a life-sized dummy filled with meat inside a tank full of real piranhas. The plan was simple: throw the fake body in the water and let the fish do the work. But reality didn't cooperate. Instead of a bloody frenzy, what happened was far less cinematic. The piranhas were hard to control, and the camera they used didn't work very well underwater. The footage ended up being discarded. The baby scene. This scene was filmed for the first It from 2017. The idea was to show a flashback set in 1637 in the early days of Derry, long before the Losers Club, long before the town became what we know. The scene follows a young mother named Abigail inside an isolated cabin. She's holding her baby when a primitive version of Pennywise appears. No full clown costume. He shows up pale, almost translucent, with a more raw, more ancient appearance. The creature proposes a deal. Either she gives up the baby or he kills the entire family. According to reports and interviews with Bill Skarsgård, the scene showed Abigail completely dominated by fear and by the influence of the deadlights. She places the baby on the floor and turns her back. The camera stays focused on her face. In the background, out of focus, Pennywise moves closer. The sound makes it clear what's happening, but the violence isn't shown directly. Even so, the impact was devastating. The production considered the sequence excessively disturbing for the rating. It wasn't essential to the main story of the 2017 film and could push part of the audience away. There was some expectation that it might appear in E.T. Chapter 2 as a flashback, but that didn't happen either. Muschietti has commented that the scene was simply too heavy for that point in the story.
No, but I don't want people to have that conception in their head because it's not right. You know, it's not something we would show.
The Pickaxe of Love. In 1981, My Bloody Valentine hit theaters, a slasher set in a small mining town where the legend of Harry Warden haunts Valentine's Day. Years earlier, an accident trapped workers inside the mine. After that trauma, murders start marking the date, even with warnings being ignored. The killer wears a miner's uniform, a gas mask, and carries a pickaxe. A simple but memorable look that helped the movie stand out during the wave of early 80s horror films. At the time of release, censorship demanded severe cuts to several death scenes. Decades later, part of that material was restored and included in special editions. Even so, there's one sequence that never resurfaced. According to director George Mihalka, there was a scene involving a couple alone inside the mine. They kiss while lying on the ground, completely distracted. The typical slasher setup that signals something terrible is about to happen. The miner appears and attacks while the two are still embracing. The idea was to create a disturbing image with one cruel detail. The girl would take a few seconds to realize what was happening. That sequence wasn't just cut. The footage simply disappeared with no known copies. Mihalka said it was one of the most impactful scenes they filmed. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. There's another great video on the screen for you to watch. See you soon!